In the basement archives of Tulane University's medical library, beneath decades of dust and institutional neglect, a folder marked only with the year 1871 contains 3 pages that were never meant to survive. The handwriting is cramped, urgent, the penmanship of a man writing in secret. Dr. Auguste Beauregard's final journal entry reads like a confession. The boy's eyes follow me even now, though he vanished from this ward 3 months past. I fear I have witnessed something beyond the realm of medicine, beyond the realm of reason itself. What drove a respected physician to hide these records? What happened in the summer of 1871 that an entire hospital conspired to forget? Before we descend into this buried chapter of American medical history, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear has been suppressed for more than a century. If these stories disturb you, if they challenge what you believe about the boundaries of human experience, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment letting me know what you're watching from. Your phone, your laptop, maybe lying in bed unable to sleep yourself. Because we're about to uncover truths that institutions spent generations trying to bury. Picture New Orleans in the sweltering summer of 1871. The Civil War's wounds are still fresh. Yellow fever outbreaks sweep through the cramped quarters of the French Quarter, and the Charity Hospital of New Orleans stands as both sanctuary and house of horrors for the city's poorest residents. Gas lamps flicker against thick humidity that makes breathing feel like drowning in air. The Mississippi River carries secrets as dark as its muddy waters, and the sound of steamboat whistles mingles with the cries of street vendors hawking their wares in a dozen different languages. This is a city where Creole superstitions blend with cutting-edge medicine, where voodoo practitioners work in the shadows of St. Louis Cathedral, while European-trained physicians experiment with the latest treatments in gleaming hospital wards. It's a place where the impossible feels possible, where the line between science and supernatural has always been dangerously thin. The very architecture seems to encourage secrets, wrought iron balconies that cast twisted shadows, narrow alleyways where whispered conversations disappear into the humid air, and buildings that seem to lean in on themselves as if protecting ancient mysteries. The Charity Hospital itself is a maze of overcrowded wards, its walls echoing with the groans of the suffering and the whispered prayers of the desperate. Built in 1832 to serve the growing population of immigrants, freed slaves, and working poor, it has evolved into something more than a medical facility. It's become a repository for the city's strangest cases, the ailments that defy explanation, the patients that other institutions refuse to treat. The hospital's corridors stretch like arteries through a living organism, connecting wards where tropical diseases ravage the bodies of dock workers, where mysterious fevers claim the lives of children who were healthy just days before, where physicians encounter conditions that their European medical training never prepared them to face. The building itself seems to breathe with the rhythm of human suffering, its walls stained with the residue of countless tragedies, countless last breaths, countless moments where the boundary between life and death proves more fragile than anyone wants to believe. It's into this world of medical mystery and cultural mysticism that 8-year-old Étienne L arrives on a sultry June morning in 1871, carried in the trembling arms of his mother. The intake clerk, accustomed to the desperate pleas of New Orleans' poorest families, barely looks up as he scribbles the basic information. Child, male, age 8, complaint of sleeplessness. But this isn't ordinary insomnia. This is something that will challenge everything the medical establishment believes about human consciousness, about the nature of sleep itself, about the protective barriers that separate the living from whatever lurks in the spaces between waking and dreaming. Marie-Claire Leblanc appears in the hospital records as Madame L, double quote, a widow seamstress, resident of the Faubourg Marigny. The intake notes describe her as agitated, claiming supernatural affliction of child. But look beyond the dismissive language of 1871 medical bureaucracy, and you'll find a woman driven to the absolute edge of desperation. Her hands shake as she signs the admission papers with an X. Unable to write her own name, but desperate enough to bring her son to a place where poor children often enter alive and leave as corpses. She speaks only French to the hospital staff, her Creole accent thick with fear and exhaustion. Through a translator, a young medical student named Pierre Tremont, whose own family had emigrated from Haiti, She explains that her son hasn't slept a single night in over 3 years. Not once. Not even for a few minutes. The boy sits beside her, perfectly still, perfectly alert, his dark eyes reflecting the gaslight like black mirrors that seem to hold depths far greater than any 8-year-old should possess. Dr. Auguste Beauregard, the hospital's chief of internal medicine, is a man caught between worlds. Educated at the University of Edinburgh, he's brought European medical rigor to the chaos of New Orleans healthcare, but he's also lived in Louisiana long enough to know that some mysteries can't be solved with textbooks and instruments. He's witnessed yellow fever epidemics that defied every known pattern of disease transmission. He's treated patients who spoke in languages they'd never learned while burning with mysterious fevers. He's learned to document what he observes without always trying to explain it. At 38, Beauregard carries himself with the confidence of a man who has seen medicine's greatest triumphs and most devastating failures. His dark hair is prematurely graying at the temples, and his hands bear the scars of a surgeon who has worked without anesthesia when supplies ran low. He approaches Étienne's case with the methodical precision that made him one of the most respected physicians in the South. But something in the boy's unwavering gaze makes him deeply uncomfortable from the moment of their first meeting. His colleague, Dr. Emile Rothschild, represents the new guard of American medicine. Skeptical, scientific, dismissive of local superstitions. Fresh from his residency at Johns Hopkins, he sees New Orleans as a laboratory for testing modern medical theories against the stubborn ignorance of folk beliefs. He views Étienne's case as an opportunity to debunk Creole mysticism with hard evidence and rational analysis. Rothschild is 29, unmarried, and utterly confident in his ability to diagnose and treat any condition through the application of scientific method. He carries a leather medical bag filled with the latest instruments, thermometers, stethoscopes, ophthalmoscopes, tools that represent humanity's growing mastery over the mysteries of the human body. When he first examines Étienne, he sees not a supernatural mystery, but a fascinating neurological puzzle waiting to be solved. Nurse Catherine Broussard, a Creole woman who's worked the night shifts for over a decade, knows the hospital's darkest corners better than anyone. She's seen patients whisper their final words in languages that died with their ancestors. She's watched families gather around deathbeds, speaking in tongues that seem to call forth spirits from the other side. She knows which rooms are avoided by the cleaning staff, which wards experience unexplained cold spots even in the middle of summer, which patients seem to attract phenomena that no medical textbook can explain. When she first sees Étienne, her reaction is immediate and visceral. She crosses herself and steps backward, her dark eyes widening with recognition of something that makes her grandmother's warnings about the walking dead seem suddenly relevant. She's worked with dying children before, has held their hands as they slipped away into whatever comes after life. But there's something about this boy that feels fundamentally wrong. Not dying, but somehow existing in a state that shouldn't be possible for the living. The initial medical examination reveals nothing extraordinary, at least by the standards of 1871 medicine. Étienne is small for his age, but healthy. His reflexes are normal. His heart rate is steady at 70 beats per minute. Blood samples examined under the hospital's single microscope show no abnormalities that contemporary medical science can detect. His temperature is a consistent 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, never varying by more than 1/10 of a degree despite the hospital's fluctuating heat. But there are subtle details that don't fit the pattern of normal childhood health. His pupils don't dilate and contract with changing light the way they should. When Dr. Beauregard attempts to close the boy's eyelids manually during the examination, they spring open immediately, as if controlled by an invisible force that refuses to allow darkness. Most disturbing of all, Étienne doesn't blink with normal frequency, sometimes going 10 or 15 minutes without a single blink, his eyes growing dry and red-rimmed, but never showing any sign of discomfort. The first night of observation begins routinely. Étienne is placed in a private room in the children's ward, a luxury afforded only because of Dr. Rothschild's scientific interest in the case. The room is small but clean, with a single window overlooking the hospital's courtyard and a gas lamp that can be adjusted to provide varying levels of illumination. Nurse Broussard is assigned to monitor him through the night, armed with a logbook and instructions to record every detail of the boy's behavior. Her notes, preserved in Dr. Beauregard's hidden papers tell a different story than the sanitized version that appears in the official hospital logs. 11:30 p.m. Patient remains awake, lying perfectly still in bed. Eyes do not close or blink with normal frequency. Room temperature 74 degrees. Patient shows no signs of discomfort despite light cotton nightgown. 12:15 a.m. Patient begins speaking in whispers. Cannot discern individual words, but speech continues for approximately 10 minutes. Voice seems to change pitch and cadence, as if multiple people are speaking through him. When approached to listen more closely, patient immediately falls silent. 1:45 a.m. Patient turns to look directly at observer despite no apparent stimulus or sound. Speaks the name Elizabeth repeatedly, approximately 15 times, then asks, "Why does she fight the darkness?" When asked to clarify, patient points toward Ward C and says she will not see morning. 2:30 a.m. Patient states with absolute certainty, her heart stops now. Claims to see a woman in a white dress standing at the foot of his bed, but no one else is present in the room. 6:15 a.m. Elizabeth Comeau, age 67, found deceased in Ward C. Time of death estimated by attending physician at 2:30 a.m. Cause listed as cardiac arrest. Patient had been admitted 3 days prior for treatment of minor respiratory infection. No previous heart problems noted in medical history. Dr. Rothschild dismisses the coincidence when he reviews Nurse Broussard's report the following morning. In a hospital full of dying patients, predicting a death isn't supernatural. It's statistical probability. Perhaps the boy had overheard conversations about Mrs. Comeau's condition, or maybe he had simply made a lucky guess. The human mind, Rothschild argues, is remarkably capable of creating connections and patterns where none actually exist. But when it happens again the second night and a third time the following evening, the skepticism begins to crack. More disturbing still, Étienne begins providing details about the deaths that he couldn't possibly know. The exact position of the bodies when found, the expressions on their faces, the final words whispered to nurses who swore they had told no one what they heard. On the fourth night, he predicts the death of Thomas Boudreau, a middle-aged dock worker who had been admitted for treatment of a broken leg. There was no reason to expect complications, no sign of infection or systemic illness. But at 3:17 a.m., Étienne sits up in his bed and announces to Nurse Broussard, "The man with the yellow teeth goes to join his brother now." The fever takes him fast. Thomas Boudreau dies at 3:17 a.m. of sudden onset sepsis, his body temperature spiking to 106 degrees in a matter of minutes. His teeth, stained yellow from years of tobacco use, are mentioned in Étienne's description before any staff member could have provided that detail. And the reference to his brother proves unnervingly accurate. Boudreau's brother had died of fever 3 years earlier while working the same dock. Dr. Beauregard's journal entries become more detailed, more disturbed, as the weeks progress. Day 12. The boy speaks in perfect English now, though his mother insists he knows only French and a few words of Creole. Yesterday, he described the interior of Dr. Morrison's home with accuracy that would be impossible for a child who has never left this ward. He knew about the portrait of Morrison's deceased wife in the study, the broken floorboard beneath the dining room table, even the color of the curtains in the master bedroom. When questioned, Étienne claimed he visits while the doctor sleeps. Dr. Morrison, deeply shaken, confirms the descriptions are correct in every detail, including elements of his home that he has never discussed with anyone at the hospital. Day 18. Nurse Broussard refuses to work night shifts in the boys' ward. She claims Étienne whispers the dreams of other patients, reciting them with such detail and accuracy that several have become convinced he somehow entered their sleep. I observed this phenomenon myself. The boy recounts a nightmare experienced by Mr. Thibodeau in Ward B, describing imagery and sensations that the patient had not shared with anyone. Thibodeau breaks down weeping when Étienne repeats the exact words his deceased father spoke in the dream, words that Thibodeau swears he has never spoken aloud to any living person. The hospital's night janitor, an elderly freed slave named Baptiste, provides testimony that the doctors initially dismiss as the superstitious ramblings of an uneducated man. But Baptiste has worked in the charity hospital longer than anyone else on staff. And he's seen things in the nighttime corridors that don't appear in any medical textbook. That child, he don't sleep because he's busy. All night long, I see him in the hallways. But when I look direct, he's still in his bed when I check. His spirit, it walks while his body stays put. I seen him talking to the ghosts what live in this hospital, the ones who died here and never left. They teaching him things. They showing him what comes next for the living folks. He got one foot in this world and one foot in the next, and that ain't natural for no child. Baptista's observations are recorded only because Dr. Beauregard has begun to question everything he thought he knew about the boundaries of medical science. The janitor describes seeing Etienne's spirit form in conversation with translucent figures that seem to cluster around certain rooms, particularly those where patients are approaching death. These spirits, Baptiste claims, provide the boy with information about the past and future of every person in the hospital. He knows things about people that died here 20 years ago. Baptiste continues in his testimony. He tell me about the yellow fever epidemic of 1853, about patients who died in rooms where he ain't never been. He know their names, how they died, what they said before they passed, and he know what's coming for the living ones too. That boy, he like a door that got stuck open between the world of the living and the world of the dead. By the end of July, the medical staff is divided into two camps. Dr. Rothschild insists on treating Etienne's condition as a neurological disorder, possibly related to a rare form of encephalitis or a genetic abnormality affecting his sleep centers. Despite Dr. Beauregard's growing unease and the mounting evidence of supernatural phenomena, he agrees to a series of experimental treatments designed to force the boy into sleep. The first attempt involves laudanum, an opiate commonly used for sedation and pain relief. The dose given to Étienne, carefully calculated based on his body weight, would render an adult unconscious for 6 to 8 hours. Dr. Rothschild personally administers the dark, bitter liquid, watching as the boy drinks it without resistance or complaint. Étienne lies back on his bed, closes his eyes, and his breathing becomes deep and regular. For 20 minutes, it appears that the treatment has succeeded. Dr. Rothschild makes notes about the boy's relaxed posture, his steady pulse, the way his facial muscles have finally lost their perpetual tension. Then abruptly, Étienne sits up, opens his eyes, and asks politely if he might have a glass of water. His pulse hasn't changed. His breathing remains steady. His pupils show no signs of narcotic influence. It's as if the drug simply vanished into his system without producing any physiological effect whatsoever. Blood samples drawn an hour later show no trace of laudanum in his system, despite the witnessed administration of a dose that should have remained detectable for many hours. The second attempt is more aggressive, a combination of chloral hydrate and morphine, administered by injection to ensure rapid absorption. Dr. Rothschild personally prepares the syringe, measuring out quantities that represent the absolute maximum safe dosage for a child of Étienne's size. He injects the mixture into the boy's arm, watching for the inevitable signs of sedation. Étienne accepts the injection with the same polite compliance he has shown throughout his treatment. He thanks the doctor in perfect English, settles back against his pillow, and then begins to describe a recurring dream that Dr. Rothschild has been having about his childhood home in Philadelphia. The boy recounts details that the doctor has never shared with anyone. The color of wallpaper in his boyhood bedroom, pale blue with tiny sailing ships, the name of a dog that died when he was 7, Duchess, a golden retriever who was struck by a carriage, and the exact words his mother spoke during his father's funeral service. Your mother said the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, but she whispered afterward that sometimes the Lord's timing makes no sense at all. Étienne recites in a voice that carries the cadence and accent of Rothschild's long-dead mother. She was angry at God that day, and she never forgave herself for feeling that anger. Dr. Rothschild stumbles backward, his face drained of color, his hands shaking as he grips the bed frame for support. The boy continues speaking, his voice taking on different accents, different cadences as if multiple people are speaking through him. Dr. Beauregard dreams of his sister Marie-Thérèse, who died of consumption when she was 16. He sees her standing at the foot of his bed every night, asking why he couldn't save her, why all his medical knowledge meant nothing when she needed him most. She's still waiting for an answer. Nurse Broussard dreams of her son, Jacques, who drowned in the river when he was 5 years old. She hears his voice calling from beneath the water, asking why she let him play so close to the dock. She wakes up every morning with the taste of river water in her mouth. The janitor Baptiste dreams of his grandfather's stories about the old days in Haiti, when spirits walked freely between the world of the living and the world of the dead. His grandfather told him that some children are born with the sight, that they can see across the boundary that keeps the rest of us safe. His grandfather warned him that such children never live long because they see too much, know too much, carry too much of the other world inside them. Each revelation is accurate, each secret exposed is true, and through it all, Etienne's eyes remain fixed on the ceiling, unblinking, seeing something beyond the physical walls of the hospital room. Dr. Rothschild finds himself backing toward the door, his scientific training warring with the evidence of his own senses. "How do you know these things?" Rothschild demands, his voice cracking with strain. Etienne turns his head slowly, fixing the doctor with a gaze that seems to look directly through him. "I visit while you sleep. All of you. Your dreams are open books to me now, and I read every page. The third experimental treatment proves to be the breaking point." Doctor, Rothschild, now determined to prove that Etienne's condition has a rational explanation, decides to use ice baths combined with physical restraints, a treatment sometimes used for patients experiencing severe psychotic episodes or uncontrollable seizures. If the boy's nervous system can somehow resist chemical sedation, perhaps physical shock to his system will force the biological imperative of sleep. Etienne is strapped to a gurney with leather restraints and lowered into a tub of ice water. His body temperature drops rapidly, his lips turning blue, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. But his eyes remain open, alert, focused on something beyond the concerned faces of the medical staff surrounding him. As the minutes pass, something shifts in the room's atmosphere that has nothing to do with the temperature of the ice bath. The gas lamps begin to flicker without any change in the gas pressure. The temperature in the room seems to drop beyond what the ice water could explain, causing the breath of everyone present to become visible in small puffs of vapor. Even more disturbing, shadows begin moving across the walls in patterns that don't correspond to any movement of people or objects in the room. Etienne begins to speak, but the voice that emerges is not his own. It's older, deeper, speaking in languages that none of the medical staff recognize. Guttural syllables that seem to carry the weight of centuries, melodic phrases that sound like incantations or prayers. Then abruptly, he switches to English, but the voice remains that of an adult. Dr. Rothschild will fall before the weekends. His heart will stop while he sleeps, and he will never wake. He has seen too much. He has pushed too far into places where the living are not meant to go. The guardians of the boundary are displeased. Dr. Rothschild laughs, a sound edged with hysteria. "Impossible. I'm a healthy man of 34. My heart is strong. My family has no history of cardiac problems." Etienne turns his head in the ice water, droplets freezing on his skin, and looks directly at the doctor. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of absolute certainty. "Your heart stopped 3 times when you were born. The midwife brought you back each time, but death remembers those who slip through its grasp. Death has been waiting for you to return what was borrowed. The debt comes due when the moon is dark." 3 days later, Dr. Emil Rothschild is found dead in his bed in the small apartment he maintains near the hospital. The cause, according to the coroner's report, is sudden cardiac arrest. A healthy man of 34, with no family history of heart disease, no apparent risk factors, no signs of struggle or violence, dead in his sleep. The only unusual detail noted by the coroner is that Rothschild's eyes were found wide open, staring at the ceiling with an expression of absolute terror. The night of his death was indeed moonless, the sky dark with clouds that seemed to absorb even the light of the stars. After Dr. Rothschild's death, the hospital staff begins to unravel. Nurses request transfers to other wards. Orderlies refuse to work night shifts. Even the daytime staff grows nervous about spending time in Etienne's room, claiming that the temperature seems unnaturally cold and that shadows move independently of any light source. Nurse Catherine Broussard, who had been avoiding Etienne's ward for weeks, is assigned to night duty by a supervisor who dismisses her fears as superstition and refuses to accommodate what he sees as irrational demands. Her final shift notes are fragmentary, the handwriting increasingly erratic as the night progresses. 10:45 p.m. Patient alert and responsive. Room temperature noticeably cold despite warm evening. Multiple gas lamps required to maintain adequate lighting. 11:30 p.m. Patient begins speaking in what sounds like Creole, but using words I don't recognize. When I ask him to repeat what he said, he switches to English and asks why I never told my son about his real father. 12:15 a.m. The boy speaks to me now in my grandmother's voice, using the exact accent and phrasing I remember from childhood. He knows things about my family, about our history, that died with her years ago. He describes the hidden room beneath our house where my great-grandmother practiced voodoo, details that I have never shared with anyone. 1:30 a.m. Patient claims he can see the river spirits, the ones my grandmother warned me about as a child. He says they're coming for someone tonight, that they've been waiting for years to collect a debt. He points toward the window and asks if I can hear them singing. 2 a.m. I hear something outside, voices singing in harmony, but the melody is like nothing I've ever heard. It seems to come from the direction of the river, growing louder and more insistent. Patient nods as if this is exactly what he expected. 2:45 a.m. Patient sits up suddenly and says, "She's calling to me. The water wants what was promised." When I ask who he means, he says, "The nurse who tried to save my cousin. She's been walking toward the river for 20 minutes now. The spirits are guiding her home." 3 a.m. Unable to locate Nurse Marie Thibodeau, who was working Ward D. Her station is abandoned, her logbook left open mid-sentence. Security has been notified. Nurse Marie Thibodeau is found 3 days later, drowned in the Mississippi River. Her body shows no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Witnesses report seeing her walking toward the water at midnight, moving as if in a trance, murmuring words in Creole that none could understand, but that seemed to echo the rhythm of an old lullaby. The connection to Étienne becomes clear when hospital records reveal that Marie Thibodeau had been the attending nurse during the final illness of the boy's cousin, a child who died of yellow fever 6 months before Étienne's sleeplessness began. The cousin's medical file contains a note in Thibodeau's handwriting. Patient claims to see deceased relatives calling to him from the river. Recommends psychiatric evaluation if condition persists. Other staff members begin requesting transfers or simply abandoning their positions without notice. Those who remain report nightmares that seem to bleed into their waking hours, dreams of wandering through the hospital corridors and encountering patients who died years ago, patients who speak in voices they recognize, patients who know things about their personal lives that no dead person should know. The hospital's chaplain, Father Matthias, attempts to bless Étienne's room after several staff members report feeling an oppressive presence that seems to intensify during the night hours. The priest enters the room carrying holy water and a leather-bound Bible, confident that divine intervention can dispel whatever supernatural forces might be affecting the boy. He emerges less than 5 minutes later, his face pale and his hands shaking, refusing to explain what he experienced, but insisting that the room be sealed and the boy transferred to another facility immediately. When pressed by Dr. Beauregard for details, Father Matthias speaks only in fragments. The shadow, they have faces, old faces, young faces, faces of people who died in this place. They gather around the boy like he's their shepherd. And the boy, he's not possessed. He's something worse. He's become a door, and that door can never be closed again. Throughout these escalating horrors, Marie-Claire Leblanc has remained at her son's bedside, speaking to him in rapid French, her voice growing more desperate with each passing day. Dr. Beauregard, now the only physician willing to continue treating Étienne, arranges for Pierre Tremont to provide more detailed translation of their conversations. What they learn changes everything they thought they understood about the case. Marie-Claire has not been comforting her son or offering maternal reassurance. She has been begging him to stop. She has been pleading with him to let go of whatever power he has gained, to return to being an ordinary child who sleeps and dreams like everyone else. But more disturbing still, she has been apologizing, repeatedly, desperately, for something that happened 3 years earlier. The story she tells, translated through Pierre's careful interpretation, reveals the true origin of Étienne's condition. His sleeplessness began on the night his father died, but the death wasn't natural. It was preceded by weeks of the man claiming that someone was watching him sleep, whispering in his dreams, showing him visions of his own death with increasing clarity and detail. Papa was a good man, the translator relays, but he owed money to dangerous people. When the threats started, he couldn't sleep from fear. Etienne was only 5 then, but he was smart, sensitive. He saw how scared Papa was, how Mama cried when she thought no one was watching. The night Papa died, shot in an alley while walking home from work, Etienne made a promise. Marie Claire's voice breaks as she continues the story, her words tumbling over each other in a mixture of French and Creole that Pierre struggles to follow. Etienne said he would never sleep again. He said if he stayed awake, he could keep watch. He could protect us from the people who hurt Papa. He could see danger coming and warn us. But something went wrong. Instead of keeping the dreams away, he started collecting them, drawing them into himself like a sponge draws water. The mother's story reveals the true horror of Etienne's condition. He isn't just sleepless. He's consuming the dreams and sleep of others, drawing their rest into himself like a supernatural parasite. Each person he encounters loses a piece of their ability to find peace in sleep, their dreams becoming fragmented and disturbed, their rest invaded by visions they were never meant to see. At first, it was just our neighbors, Marie Claire continues. People on our street started having nightmares, seeing things in their dreams that made no sense. Then it spread. Everyone Etienne looked at, everyone he spoke to, they started losing their sleep bit by bit. And the boy, he began to know things. Private things, secret things. Things that people only think about in the darkness when they believe they're alone. She describes how her son's knowledge grew week by week, month by month. He began speaking of events that happened before he was born, conversations between people he had never met, secrets buried in family histories that had been forgotten for generations. He knew when people would die because he had seen their deaths in the dreams he stolen from them. He knew their fears, their guilt, their hidden shames because he had absorbed the contents of their sleeping minds. He sees what we are not meant to see, she whispers, writing the words in French across the margin of her Bible. Il voit ce que nous ne devons pas voir. He has become a window into the world of the dead, and that window cannot be closed. The spirits speak through him now. They show him the future through the dreams of the living. And every night, more of them gather around him, drawn by his ability to bridge the gap between their world and ours. The Mother's Bible becomes a crucial piece of evidence in understanding Etienne's condition. The margins are filled with desperate prayers written in multiple languages, French, Latin, what appears to be Haitian Creole, and symbols that don't correspond to any known alphabet. Between the lines of biblical text, she has recorded dates and names that correspond with unusual deaths in the New Orleans area over the past 3 years. Dr. Beauregard documents these correlations in his private journal. The boy's mother has been tracking deaths that she believes are connected to her son's condition. The patterns are disturbing. In the 3 years since Étienne stopped sleeping, there have been 47 unexplained deaths in the areas where the family has lived. All victims died in their sleep. All showed signs of severe sleep disturbances in the weeks before their deaths. Family members report they complained of nightmares, of feeling watched while they slept, of dreams so vivid and disturbing that they began to fear closing their eyes. On the night of September 15, 1871, Marie Claire LeBlanc vanishes from the charity hospital. Security guards making their rounds at midnight find her chair empty, her Bible left open to a passage from Revelations that has been heavily underlined. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Her son is found the next morning, sitting in his bed, staring at the wall where his mother's chair had been. When Dr. Beauregard asks where she has gone, Étienne responds in his mother's voice, speaking perfect Creole French. I have gone to join the others in the deep sleep. My son no longer needs me. He has all the dreams he requires now. The river called, and I answered. Security guards searched the hospital grounds, checking every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. The New Orleans Police Department dragged sections of the Mississippi River, following reports of a woman seen walking toward the water in the early hours of the morning. Marie Claire LeBlanc is never found. leaving behind only her Bible with its cryptic warnings and a small sewing kit that nurses swear moves on its own during the night shifts. The Bible itself becomes an object of fear among the hospital staff. Nurses report that the underlined passages seem to change from day to day, that new writing appears in the margins, despite the book being kept locked in Dr. Beauregard's office. Most disturbing of all, the pages sometimes seem to turn themselves, always opening to passages about death, judgment, and the boundaries between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. By October, the decision is made at the highest levels of hospital administration. Étienne's case is to be sealed, his records destroyed, his very existence erased from official documentation. Dr. Beauregard protests, arguing that the boy's condition could represent a breakthrough in understanding human consciousness, sleep disorders, and the nature of death itself. He is overruled by a coalition of hospital directors, city officials, and Catholic Church representatives. The meeting, held in the hospital's boardroom on October 10, 1871, includes some of the most powerful men in New Orleans: Mayor Benjamin Flanders, Archbishop Napoleon Perchet, and prominent businessmen whose donations keep the charity hospital operating. The meeting minutes, discovered decades later in the Archdiocesan archives, reveal the true reasoning behind the cover-up. The continued presence of the subject has resulted in 4 unexplained deaths, numerous staff resignations, and reports of supernatural phenomena that threaten the hospital's reputation and the public peace. Furthermore, local newspapers have begun investigating rumors of a devil child residing in our facility. Such publicity could result in the loss of public funding and private donations essential to the hospital's operation. For the protection of public health, civic order, and institutional stability, all records of this case must be destroyed and all involved personnel sworn to secrecy under threat of immediate dismissal and legal action. Dr. Beauregard is given a choice: sign the secrecy agreement and continue his career, or face dismissal, public disgrace, and the destruction of his professional reputation. The threat is made explicit: any attempt to discuss the case publicly will result in his being declared mentally unfit to practice medicine, his medical license revoked, and his commitment to an asylum for treatment of delusional disorders brought on by exposure to tropical diseases and the stresses of working with the city's most desperate cases. Beauregard signs the agreement, but secretly preserves his personal journal entries, hiding them in a sealed envelope within his private medical library. His final entry, dated October 30th, 1871, reveals a man struggling with the weight of secrets that no physician should have to carry. I have sworn to forget what I have witnessed, but how does one forget the sound of a child speaking in the voice of the dead? How does one forget watching a boy who has not slept in over 3 years describe the dreams of people he has never met? The administrators speak of protecting public health, but what about protecting the public from truths that could shatter their understanding of life and death itself? Perhaps some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain buried. On October 31st, 1871, Halloween night, though the irony is lost on no one involved, Étienne disappears from the charity hospital. The night shift nurse, a recent hire named Agnes Murphy, who knew nothing of the boy's history, makes her rounds at midnight and finds his room empty. The bed shows no signs of struggle. The window remains locked from the inside. The door was under constant observation by security guards who swear no one entered or left the room. Agnes Murphy's report, filed the following morning, captures the impossible nature of the disappearance. Patient was observed sleeping peacefully at 11:45 p.m. Room was locked and secured according to standard protocol. No unusual sounds or disturbances noted. At 12:15 a.m., patient was discovered missing from secured room. Thorough search of hospital premises conducted. No trace of patient found. No explanation available for how patient could have left room without detection. The official story, circulated to staff and entered into hospital records, is that Étienne was transferred during the night to a specialized facility in another state. But the transfer papers were never filed. The receiving institution was never contacted. The ambulance company has no record of any transport, and Dr. Beauregard's private notes suggest a far more disturbing truth. I believe the boy simply faded, as if his connection to this physical world had grown too tenuous to maintain. He had absorbed so many dreams, so many fragments of other people's consciousness, that his own identity became diluted beyond the point of physical existence. Or perhaps he found what he was looking for: enough dreams, enough sleep, enough glimpses into the realm beyond death. Perhaps he finally found rest, not in sleep, but in whatever lies beyond the boundary between the living and the dead. The room where Étienne spent his final months becomes a source of ongoing disturbance. Despite thorough cleaning and multiple attempts at renovation, hospital staff report persistent anomalies: cold spots that appear without explanation, shadows that move independently of any light source, and the sound of a child's voice whispering in the walls during the night shifts. Most disturbing of all, patients assigned to the room, always unknowing of its history, report identical dreams. They describe a young boy standing at the foot of their bed, speaking to them in voices they recognize but cannot place, telling them secrets about their own lives that they have never shared with anyone. These patients invariably request transfers to other rooms, complaining of sleep disturbances that make rest impossible. The Charity Hospital of New Orleans continued operating until 2005, when Hurricane Katrina finally closed its doors permanently. But throughout its 134-year history, staff members reported recurring phenomena that seemed connected to the events of 1871, patterns that grew stronger during certain times of the year, particularly the months between June and October, the period when Étienne had been a patient. Night shift workers spoke of a child's voice whispering in the hallways, recounting patients' dreams with unsettling accuracy. Security cameras installed decades later during the hospital's modernization efforts occasionally captured the image of a small figure moving through wards where no children were present. The footage was always blurry, indistinct, but the timestamp invariably showed the appearances occurring between midnight and dawn, the hours when the boundary between sleeping and waking becomes most fragile. Dr. Auguste Beauregard left New Orleans in the spring of 1872, accepting a position at a small clinic in rural Vermont. His colleagues noted that he became obsessed with sleep research, publishing papers on insomnia and dream analysis that were far ahead of their time. He never married, never had children, and seemed to live in constant fear of the darkness that sleep might bring. His research notes, discovered after his death in 1899, reveal a man haunted by questions that medical science was not yet equipped to answer. What is sleep but a daily death from which we are privileged to return? What are dreams but glimpses into realms that our waking minds are too limited to comprehend? I have seen what happens when that daily death is denied, when the protective barrier of unconsciousness is removed. I have witnessed a child become a conduit between worlds, and I pray that no other physician will ever be forced to document such phenomena. Beauregard died in his study in Vermont, found by his housekeeper slumped over his desk. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but those who knew him noted that his eyes were wide open, staring at notes he had been writing about the relationship between consciousness and mortality. His final written words were found on the paper beneath his hand. "He is calling to me across the years. The boy who never slept wants to show me what he learned in all those wakeful hours. I fear I am about to discover what lies beyond the dreams of the living." The site where the original Charity Hospital stood is now a parking lot serving the modern University Medical Center. But construction workers who prepared the ground for development reported finding strange artifacts buried far deeper than they should have been. Children's toys from the 1870s, Bibles with pages torn out and replaced with handwritten notes in languages that local scholars couldn't identify, and medical instruments that seemed to have been deliberately hidden rather than simply discarded. Most unsettling of all, workers reported finding a child's nightgown, perfectly preserved despite being buried for over a century, with a note sewn into the collar in fine, careful stitching. "He sleeps now in dreams borrowed from the living. Do not wake him." And sometimes late at night, residents of the nearby French Quarter report seeing a small figure standing at the edge of the Mississippi River, staring into the dark water as if waiting for something, or someone, to emerge from its depths. The figure never moves, never responds to calls or approaches, but witnesses describe feeling an overwhelming urge to join him at the water's edge, to listen to whatever secrets he might whisper about the nature of dreams and death. The question that haunts this case isn't whether an 8-year-old boy could survive without sleep for years. Modern science has documented cases of fatal familial insomnia and other rare disorders that disrupt normal sleep patterns, conditions that can keep patients awake for months before their bodies finally succumb to exhaustion. The question is what Étienne saw during those endless waking hours, what knowledge he gained from his supernatural insomnia. If consciousness is a window into reality, what happens when that window never closes? What accumulates in a mind that never rests, never dreams, never retreats into the protective unconsciousness that separates us from forces we don't understand? What price do others pay when someone gains the ability to walk freely through the landscape of their dreams? The medical records suggest that Etienne didn't just lose the ability to sleep, he gained the ability to perceive layers of existence that normally remain hidden from waking minds. He became a conduit between the world of the living and whatever lies beyond, a child-shaped gateway through which things that should stay buried could reach into our reality and claim what they believed was owed to them. Marie-Claire Leblanc's final warning echoes across more than a century. He sees what we are not meant to see. Perhaps there are boundaries in human experience that exist for our protection, invisible barriers that keep us safely separated from truths too terrible for conscious minds to bear. Perhaps sleep isn't just rest for the body, but a mercy for the soul, a daily retreat from knowledge that would drive us mad if we encountered it while awake. The files are sealed, the witnesses are dead, the institution has closed. But somewhere in the space between sleeping and waking, between the living and the dead, between the rational world of medicine and the supernatural realm that lurks just beyond our perception, a boy who never slept continues his eternal vigil. And perhaps in the deepest hours of the night, when you find yourself lying awake, unable to fall asleep, you might wonder, are you experiencing ordinary insomnia? Or is someone else consuming your rest, adding your dreams to a collection that has been growing for more than 150 years? Are your sleepless hours truly your own, or are they being borrowed by a consciousness that learned long ago how to exist in the spaces between waking and dreaming? In New Orleans, where the living and the dead have always walked side by side, where voodoo and medicine dance together in the humid air, where the boundary between the natural and supernatural has always been dangerously thin, some say that if you know where to look, in the reflection of streetlights on wet cobblestones, in the shadows cast by wrought iron balconies, in the mist that rises from the Mississippi River at dawn, you can still see him, still watching, still waiting, still collecting the dreams of the living to fuel his endless wakefulness, still awake. The story of Étienne L remains buried in archives and hidden in the margins of forgotten medical journals. But the questions it raises about the nature of consciousness, the purpose of sleep, and the price of supernatural knowledge continue to echo through the corridors of modern medicine. What would happen if contemporary sleep researchers encountered a case like Etienne's? What would modern technology reveal about a child who could survive without sleep while absorbing the dreams of others? Perhaps some mysteries are best left buried. Perhaps some chapters of history should remain dark. But for those who seek to understand the furthest reaches of human experience, who refuse to accept that science has mapped all the territories of consciousness, the case of the boy who never slept serves as both warning and invitation. Warning that some knowledge comes at a price too terrible to pay. An invitation to consider that the boundaries between life and death, between sleeping and waking, between the natural and supernatural, might be far more fragile than we dare to believe. What do you think happened to Étienne? Was his condition a medical anomaly that science simply wasn't advanced enough to understand? Or something far more sinister that challenges our basic assumptions about the nature of human consciousness? Have you ever experienced sleepless nights that felt different somehow? As if your wakefulness wasn't entirely your own? Hit that like button if this buried truth has left you questioning what other horrors lie hidden in the archives of American history. Subscribe if you want to explore more chapters that institutions tried to erase from memory, and drop a comment letting me know what you're watching from. Your phone while lying in bed unable to sleep, your laptop in a dark room, or maybe somewhere else entirely. Because the darkness has many more secrets to reveal, and we've only just begun to dig into the buried truths that shape this nation. Next week, we'll uncover the story of the hunger artist of Pittsburgh, Heinrich Miller, who claimed he hadn't eaten solid food in 4 years, and the deadly experiments that tried to prove him wrong. Until then, sleep well, if you can.